flowers. We'll do the fruit when we can get everything.
Yeah. Mark, hello.
Hey, you're right, Kevin. How are you? Good to see
I'm
you.
very good. Yeah. Good to see you. It seems ages since I last saw you.
It is. It's a long time. I know. I know. Quite a while. I've just literally jumped off a meeting. I've been back to back for the last few hours. So
Ah, right. Doing exciting stuff, I hope.
yeah, it's very exciting. It's exciting times, actually.
Yeah.
I have been. It's funny because I mean, like most of us, I've been living in this box
Yeah.
for like the whole year. So
Yeah, indeed. Indeed. Yes.
but
Yeah.
yeah.
I've almost forgotten what it's like to run a workshop properly with a client.
What is that? What is that like? I mean, I've done
Yeah.
quite a lot of maybe like you've done lots of Zoom workshops and events,
Yeah.
but just the idea of being able to step in front of an audience again, work with people live,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
excited.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So I just thought it'd be great to get you on a podcast since your material's sitting inside GrowCFO and so on. I thought now some way of talking about it, and I don't know, I just had this idea of maybe is there something we can do about linking what you generally teach, Mark, into that kind of start of the year, new set of
Mm.
objectives, all of that stuff. This is going to sit in a sequence, I hope. Um, the first of the 3 episodes went out yesterday, talking to Andrew Waters about
Mhm.
reviewing your finance team in general. You're the CFO, you're looking at people's performance and so on. You're thinking about, okay, hang on, we've muddled by under COVID for 9 months. Perhaps it's now time we think about actually what are we doing long term? What's the structure of this team look like? Who are the shakers and movers? How do we give them extra stuff? How do we keep them motivated? So on.
Yeah.
I'm going to record one with Catherine Clark, which is going to be about more the personal side of objective setting for the next year. Then I wondered about a third one that's about, well, hang on, it's New Year. You've set all these objectives. A few of them probably feel a bit like your New Year's resolutions. How do we actually implement the darn stuff?
Yeah.
And my way is to start thinking tiny habits and so on. And all of that good stuff, which is, this feels like a conversation with Mark. So apart from that bit of initial thinking, Mark, how 30 minutes of podcast actually progresses is an open book.
Yeah. Well, no, it's interesting. I mean, I have, I guess, an approach that I use when I work with clients. Interestingly, I'm doing a Guardian masterclass in beginning of January. It sold out really quickly, but it's all about focus, productivity, motivation, and in that, one of the things I'll share is my framework for this.
Yeah.
So I guess like many people, I have an approach in terms of long term, short term habits,
Mm.
and I think you need the complete puzzle,
Yeah.
the complete piece in order to follow it through. What I'm really big on is ownership.
Yeah.
But even if people pick from lots of different things, own the thing for yourself.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, that's what's going to increase the chances of you actually following through and using the stuff. So,
Yeah. Brilliant. Mark, you sound a tiny bit quiet. I don't know if it's possible to get closer to the microphone. Or...
there you go. Give me a shout if that happens again. Is that better?
That's better, but it's suddenly introduced a load of interference. Hang on, talk again.
Here you go. Usually,
yeah, that's fine. That's fine. The interference went. It was obviously moving something. Yeah.
You know what? That's this mic. It cost me about 300 quid. All this kit, and every time in Zoom, it sometimes plays up. And I'll be doing a work. I was doing a workshop a couple of weeks ago, and it was a full day. And then at some point, it just dropped the sound.
Yeah,
That
I was
happens,
looking at that microphone. That looks the same as mine. Blue Yeti.
No, it's a Rode.
Rode, right? Okay.
It's a Rode, but I've got a kind of a Rode box over there as well, and it only happens to me on Zoom. So I think the power just kind of drops.
Yeah, I've got a little Rode lav mic which I use occasionally plugged into my phone. That's brilliant. Yeah,
I've got one of those as well. I use that for courses actually. It's fantastic.
Yeah, but now I've been using this Blue Yeti thing for recording podcasts and so on for about the last 5 years. So
sounds great.
Yeah. Another opportunity, Mark, if you want it. I have been podcasting for about 5 years, doing something called the Next 100 Days with colleague Graham Arrowsmith.
Yeah, it's
a general business podcast where we're very Catholic about what we talk about.
Yeah.
If you fancied coming on the show and talking about anything that particularly appeals to you, then we'd love to have you as a guest in the new year.
Great. No, it sounds fantastic. Yeah. I mean, there's, to give you some context, I mean, right now, I've been essentially slowly pivoting the memory business, because obviously I've got a big background in memory. However, in reality, when I work with people, the area that I play in the most is more around flow, focus, being able to get the most out of the time that you have. And what that really leads to is either a career transition, or the other thing that I'm doing right now is working a lot with startups. I've got 10 years of product development. So I just,
you know what, our next 100 days audience, we've now tested this out to see if it is actually the audience, but Graham and I always imagine it's guys like ourselves who've been in corporate and got to the point that we're fed up with it, and we've kind of corporate escaped into our own business. So we're thinking the audience are either people that are thinking about doing it or people that have done it. So that idea of getting to the point that people need to do something different, that could be an interesting angle to take, but something for the new year if you fancy doing it.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of my clients, that's exactly where they are. I've got a client right now who's just transitioning, starting off an acting business, which is very interesting. One of my passions. So. Yeah.
And I'm talking a bit about your background on there. I think would be fascinating. I mean, Graham and I are very good at chatting about anything in particular or nothing in particular, whichever way you put it. Yeah.
I know the feeling.
Yeah. And we always divert into football somewhere or other.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's great.
Okay. Shall we just take it from the top and see where we get to?
Yeah, let's just
have a chat and see where it goes. Okay.
I can't guarantee where it will go. Let's just.
No, I don't mind. I've found over 5 years, Mark, the best way to record a podcast was with no script at all.
Yeah.
When you've got a script, you sort of think, well, we're going to talk about those 5 things. Now, how on earth do I artificially drag the conversation back so we talk about them? It just doesn't work.
I never plan for these things. I've done quite a few of them, and I never plan. Let's see what comes up, and I'll talk about what's in my head.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. So, hello and welcome to the GrowCFO Show. I'm your host, Kevin Appleby, and today I've got a very interesting gentleman with me, a gentleman by the name of Mark Channon. Hello, Mark.
Good to see you, Kevin. Great to be here. Thank you for inviting me on.
So, Mark, we're going to have a chat today about the year lying ahead. With the last couple of episodes of the show, we've been talking about reviewing your teams, setting objectives and things like that. But today, I think we're going to have a chat about, well, how do you actually make it happen? How do you embed this stuff? But before we start, Mark, tell us a little bit about you.
Okay, so it's fair to say I've had a very eclectic background. It's very, very, very mixed. I was an actor for 15 years. I'll be 50 next year. I'm 49 right now, but back in the early 90s, I was an actor for about 15 years. Lots of musicals, lots of stuff in the West End. And during that time, I got involved in what some people would consider a fairly crazy world. It was a world of memory improvement. I ended up writing a game show for the BBC. I don't even remember it. It was called Monkhouse's Memory Masters.
Oh, I do remember it.
Do you? You know, you're probably
Yes.
one of a few. Not many people remember it anymore.
Yeah.
It was a long time ago. It went out to about 8 million people though, so it was quite big at the time, and it had a bit of a major transformation in my life because for the last 25 years, one of the things that I've done is show people how to improve their memory, improve their focus, bust through learning curves, etc. So I've worked as a coach for the last 25 years in that area, but I have also had quite a mixed bag in terms of my background. I worked in product development. I was at the BBC for 7 years. I was at Telegraph for 4 years. I worked in Microsoft for a while, ran my own startup. So I've got quite a large product development background in digital products. So it's a real mix. And over those years, you kind of, I think like many people, you pick up a lot of strategies along the way. I trained as a hypnotherapist for a year, did a lot of trained as an executive coach. So you kind of have this mixed bag. Right now, I run my own coaching business. So that's my primary focus. I work a lot with people who are doing career transition. I work with a lot of startups on the product development side. And I like it because I get a lot of variety. But I think the reason I like it the most is that you see the impact that people can have by sometimes just making a few simple changes in their lives.
I guess that takes us to what we're going to talk about today. A few simple changes in your life. Right. So it's the first week in January. We've all sat there making those wild New Year's resolutions. By now, we've probably broken them all already. But how do you make those few simple changes in your life, Mark?
It's a good question. Interestingly, my first step, and I've done this for years now, is I never make New Year's resolutions, and I don't actually think about planning the what's going to happen in that year. I might have some thoughts about it, but whenever I work with clients, I always suggest the same thing till about the 15th of Jan. So let all the hype over that new year fade away, and then get very, very focused about what is it that you want to do going forward.
Yeah. Now, you know something, Mark? I'm kind of the same as you. I don't set New Year's resolutions either. And I do think a little bit about what do I want to achieve in the next year, but I tend to do that in September.
Yeah.
And I think that's something about, well, the new school year always start in September, the new university year, whatever it was. It always seems to be the time of the year for new things starting up. And now you're back from your summer holidays, freshened, ready to go. What's it all about? Yeah. So.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, my planning for next year, like you, it's started. I know what next year looks like. I'll have a break, and then probably about the 15th, I'll start ramping things up. But I think like many people, I've got a framework that I use. I do like a 3-3-1, where I look at 3 years from now, I look at 3 months from now, and we used to do this when I worked in corporates, and I worked in BBC or Telegraph. So you'll work across the quarter. I'll use a set of objectives, key results. I'll use the OKR method for clarity, but then I'm really, really big on what's the one big thing. So in terms of 3-3-1, 3 years, 3 months, what is the one big thing this week?
Yeah.
So, and the analogy I like to use is, I don't know if you've seen Harry Potter. I've got 3 boys, so obviously
I've seen all the Harry Potter films.
Yeah. And when Dumbledore takes the memories out of his head, and I deal with memory a lot, so this sounds almost counterintuitive coming from a memory guy, but whenever I work with anyone on focus, or let's say productivity or memory, I always suggest get the stuff out of your head clear. So the way you do that in the week is ask yourself, what is the one big win for this week? It doesn't mean you don't have a to-do list. It just means you start to get clarity on the priorities and how you'll react to things. Along that lines, then you get down to the daily actions that you take. And this probably is more relevant to the actual question that you asked. And this is where I use something called tiny habits.
Yeah.
You've heard of tiny habits.
I've heard of tiny habits. I discovered tiny habits on an online course years ago, and there's the link to the prof in the States that invented it, whose name escapes me for the time being.
Yeah, so BJ Fogg. So
BJ Fogg, that's the man, Dr. Fogg.
You know what? I've known BJ for years now. I was actually one of the first UK coaches in Tiny Habits. So I trained with BJ many, many years ago. Still don't know what B stands for or the J. There you go, just BJ. And I was fascinated by it. I was fascinated by the promise of Tiny Habits. And I remember I was chatting to BJ. It was one of the first calls that we did. And the promise was create new behaviors without the need for willpower or motivation. I thought, well, I have to try this because it sounds too good to be true, right? Really? No.
This is exactly what I love about it. Absolutely, yeah.
And so I was very cynical, I'll be honest, before I started. But I did the 5-day free course. And this is something that I run as well with people that come in. And it's kind of in partnership with BJ. And during that 5 days, you essentially start with some really simple behaviors that you want to create, just so you can learn the process of tiny habits. So mine was like super simple. Drink more water. I thought, I'm not drinking enough. I need to be more energized. I want to drink more. So, okay. So I created a little tiny habit around drinking water. After I get up in the morning, I will drink some water. And with a tiny habit, you end up doing this little celebration. You go, great. The second tiny habit I created was around getting fitter in my life. Now, I was an actor, like I said. And during my musical theatre days, I used to do all sorts of crazy things. I did Singing in the Rain, actually where I met my wife at the National Theatre many years ago, 2000. And I used to somersault off walls. But I had quite a few bad falls. It didn't work.
I can imagine. Yeah, I don't fancy somersaulting off walls.
8 shows a week, it didn't always work. And so I kind of busted my back up a little bit. So I have to do Pilates every day. But I wasn't being consistent. And I didn't actually want to do it. It's not that I really enjoy doing it. I just have to do it. And I thought, you know what? If tiny habits can help me do Pilates every day, I'm sold. That'll do it. And so I created a tiny habit where it was something like this. After I walk into the living room, I will put my Pilates mat on the floor, and then you do that celebration. I go, yes! And then I go back to bed. That's all I do. Sounds crazy. But for like 4 days. But the idea is, you can think about it as in terms of ABC. This is the kind of analogy. A is for the anchor. Pick a moment in your life, a current habit that exists. B, take a behavior you want to create. For me, I wanted to end up doing about 20 to 30 minutes of Pilates. But you do the very tiniest version of that. So I thought the tiniest version is just putting the Pilates mat on the floor. And then C is the third part, is a celebration. Now, the celebration is really important because what that gives you when you give yourself a big old fist bump or high five, it feels silly, but there's an emotion created. And that's what actually makes the habit automatic. It's what makes it stick. So tomorrow when you wake up, you walk into the living room and, oh, Pilates mat on the floor. And so it starts to be something that you don't have to consciously think about. Anyway, it worked for me, and I ended up, 3rd, 4th day, ended up doing 10 minutes of Pilates, and then it grew. And I don't think there's a day that's gone by, maybe the odd occasion, that, I haven't done it. It's something that is just built in now. It's a ritual, it's a behavior. It's something that I always do. Even if I'm off somewhere, I'll still find at least, 5 minutes to kind of go through that process. Yeah,
I can reflect on something fairly similar. Actually, it's chaining more habits together than you just mentioned. I've got a neck problem. I was involved in a car accident years ago, and it left me. And these days, you'd probably sue the driver that came in the back of me for the whiplash it caused. But back then, you didn't do that sort of thing. So I tend to go for a bit of physio once every 6 weeks or so. And Tracy, the physio, said, Kevin, first of all, you're spending too much time sitting in front of a screen. You need to get up more and walk about more during the day. Oh, and do you realize you're dehydrated? So back to your thing about water, and I'd done a little bit of that anyway. So the tiny habit was quite simple. When you sit down at your desk, make sure that you sit down with a pint glass of water on the desk, okay, which you then drink during the next working session. That's fine. Sit down at desk, trigger, glass of water on the desk, action. Thing is, that then leads to another action. Drink a pint of water. What goes in has to come out again. That nice little tiny habit then means that I've got to get up from this desk quite a bit more often. And then Tracy added another habit to this that said, okay, when you've gone to remove the water from your system, do 10 push-ups against the wall. So not full push-ups on the floor, but arms out, push against the wall. That'll loosen your neck off. So number one, we've solved the dehydration. Number two, we've solved the sitting at your desk too long. And number three, we've done something about stretching the right muscles around your neck so it doesn't get tensed up. And that kind of two tiny habits in there, sort of flush the loo, 10 push-ups, trigger, action once again. And it works. It really does work.
Yeah, I see it all the time. You're so right. I think it was what amazed me when I first went through the process is there's a domino effect. And even with something, I was drinking a glass of water in the morning. However, like you, what it actually did was prime my brain. So now water was drawing my attention. So I remember I'd then go to work, and I was actually working at the Telegraph at the time, and I'd pass the water cooler, and I started just drinking more water naturally, because my brain was thinking, oh, I might as well drink some more water. Because now I was saying this is important subconsciously. And you have that knock-on effect. So something super, super tiny. And so I know when some people go through the process, they go, what do you mean one push-up? I want to work out. We'll just start with one push-up. And it doesn't feel enough. But once it becomes automatic, it almost becomes quite addictive. And you just want to do more. Yeah. And actually what then happens is your motivation levels increase as well. But that's not where you start.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think there's something there, Mark, in whatever you want to achieve, make sure you do it by routine and do it consistently. Great book that I loved reading, a book called Routine Machine by John Lamberton. And anybody who can manage to put a chapter on the Arsenal back four and 1-0 to the Arsenal in a book about time management gets my vote every time. But John's essentially saying that, look, what I will do is I'll do what I want, when I want, if I want. But hang on a minute. That means that if I've made the choice that I want to do something, then the only way to guarantee that I've got get it done is to actually schedule it in. So at 9 o'clock, I will sit down and do X every Monday. And to me, that works as well.
Yeah. I think there's a word that you said there about choice. And it's in the moments where you don't want to do something, realizing that you now have a choice whether you do or whether you don't.
Yes.
Because a lot of us will go, I remember I just finished writing a book over the summer. It was a book for actors on rapid line learning for auditions and performance, etc. And because like everyone else, I'm doing a day job, I'm working through the day, I ended up writing my book between the hours of about 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. in the morning. And I didn't always want to write that book. And
quite.
You get that phrase pop into your head like, wow, why do I have to do this? Now, whenever that happens, I catch myself now and go, well, you don't have to do anything. And and then you start to realize you have that conversation where you go, well, actually, I'm really grateful that I've got an opportunity to actually write the book, and I've got a publisher for this thing, and wow, this is really amazing. Actually, this is super exciting. And within about 60 seconds, now you feel very, very differently about sitting down for the next 4 hours, and you overcome that inertia, which is that procrastination which stops you.
Yeah.
You got that switch and you go, well, I've got a choice. It's something my wife reminds me on as well. If ever I say that phrase, she go, you got the choice, and you go, you're so right.
Yeah. But in actual fact, what's the decision there? It's, do I write a word down on a piece of paper, or don't I write a word down on a piece of paper? It's literally as small as that. Yeah. And it's as easy to write a word down as it is not to write a word down. And that's the problem. It's easy not to.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think and this is why I think there's also something else about understanding, and this can happen at the outset of anything that you want to achieve is why.
Yeah.
Why is it important? And it sounds super obvious. And sometimes we might think that we understand why. We don't always do. We haven't really dug really deep to understand what impact will following through on something like writing a book, for example, have in my life. How might that make a difference for other people? And you start to go down that avenue and you really start to tap into some of those deeper values of maybe what you're even here to do. And that becomes highly motivating.
Yeah. Absolutely. I'd say to anybody that may not have worked their purpose out, go work it out. But hey, there's a whole other podcast in that, Mark.
There's a whole other podcast.
Yeah, yeah. But now, we've talked about those tiny habits. Now, tiny habits is great for getting small things started on a regular basis. What about the big stuff? We touched on it a little bit. I mean, there's you writing the book, but there's something more than writing that first word. There's something that's more about getting into the flow of doing it. How do you actually make it happen, Mark?
So it's partly if you go through the process of tiny habits, it's partly then understanding what needs to happen to grow something that is tiny into something larger.
Okay. Tell me more.
And this what really taps into the consistency. So the idea, if you can consistently sit down for 30 seconds at 10 p.m. at night, maybe after you pour yourself a cup of tea, I'll sit down for 30 seconds, open up your laptop, write one word, close it, celebrate, go to bed. Then that moment becomes automatic. Once something has become automatic in that way, it's then easier to go, you know what, today I will write for the next 25 minutes. But if tomorrow I just want to write one word, I also have that choice. And it's that word consistency. So I think consistency has to exist if you really want to grow a larger behavior over that period of time. And so that's the point where I'd start is actually building in that consistency. And then there's the act of what if I'm distracted? What if I sit down and I do my tiny habit, but still, okay, something is blocking me in some way. There's some kind of friction there. I'm thinking about what I've got to do tomorrow at work, so I can't focus. And this is where strategies, things like the Pomodoro technique, which setting a timer, I think we talked about at the beginning there. So Pomodoro, that idea of what can I do to bring myself present in the moment and let go of everything else. So I think if you want to create a larger behavior, we use the book example. I was writing for 4 hours. And so to write for 4 hours, I'd use my phone. I do my 25-minute timer, but I didn't think about what I was going to write about before I set the timer. I would press the button and now I'm off. It's like I've stepped on the roller coaster. I now can't get off. I can then ask myself, okay, what is the next 4 hours about? That question sets you up for that 4 hour period. Because now I'm now thinking, okay, what are the timer's started? I'm off. What's the next 4 hours? Well, I'm going to write the skeleton of this chapter. If I finish it early, awesome. I'll go to bed once I've done that. If I don't get there, it's okay. I'm still going to get through a lot of work. So I do think it's that balance of, one, creating something which is automatic and consistent. Knowing you have the choice to grow that as large or as small. Is this going to be right for you? And then also having a process, a system which allows you to focus at the highest level that you can. And there's things you can do in the moment for that, but then there's other things outside of that. Things like mindfulness or meditation. There's lots of research around the benefits of practicing mindfulness. And for me, that's really about your ability to focus on one thing and nothing else. As an actor, we used to do, this is when I was in my early 20s, Stanislavski type exercises where you'd pick up an object and you do something called sense memory, where you'd spend 30 minutes observing a rock, which sounds ridiculous. But actually, the skill that you're practicing is being completely present. And round about you, people will be trying to distract you and do things to knock you off guard. Now, there's a benefit to that when you step on stage. Nothing's going to knock you off. You practice that art of being completely in the moment. If you do public speaking, same thing. That can translate to different areas of your life.
Yeah. And there's a few things there that you've mentioned. And I come back first of all to John Lamerton's book. And his whole point of mentioning the Arsenal back four and 1-0 to the Arsenal was, hey, they had to put in a lot of consistent, regular drills on the training pitch to get 1-0 to the Arsenal. It didn't just happen. There was a whole load of routine on the training ground to get there. But I think the other thing, and it's something I've used a fair bit in the past, Pomodoro technique. In fact, that drinking water example is a classic one. You sit down with that glass of water at the start of your 25 minutes. I'm going to have to get back into that next year because there's so much benefit in using that Pomodoro, set the time for 25 minutes. And I did find when I was doing it regularly, you got to the end of the 25 minutes and you almost ignored the alarm going off because you were in flow.
Absolutely. It's interesting, actually. When I work with Pomodoro, so I've got a few distinctions that I kind of layer around it. One is I have a little technique where I'll get mini post-it notes, and if I'm writing a book, for example, or if I'm putting together a presentation or coming up with working on a project, I'll allocate in that day a number of post-its, and each of them represent 25 minutes. And you almost gamify the experience. So I put down 4 or 5 post-its. Those are 25-minute chunks. And then, because my day, I think like many, is that you can't block out 3 hours to do one thing. I might be having certain meetings or coaching, and so therefore you have to be able to context switch. So I'm quite big on how do you go from doing one thing and then very rapidly hitting a high level of focus, doing 25 minutes solid and be able to move something forward. And so I almost suggest and recommend that after you 25 minutes stop, literally be religious in stopping, break, walk away from it, and then practice switching right back into it. Because it's what you said about that practice. You're training your brain to very quickly context switch.
Yeah.
You know,
And I think that's where I haven't been doing it perhaps as well as I could, because I don't have those post-it notes. I've sort of sat down and thinking, what do I want to achieve today? Oh, it's this. Bang. 25 minutes, let's start. I haven't sort of chunked it down into its component bits. And I think that's a good idea because it stops you spending too long messing about with any one of them. You know, good enough's good enough. You're not going for perfection generally.
Yeah. That's a great phrase. Good enough is good enough. It's so true.
But I suppose something else comes to mind in what we've been talking about, and that's, you said you'd go into 3 years, 3 months, 1 month, and focusing on one thing. That over the years is something I've realized, and there's a book, the name of the author is not coming to mind at the moment. I'll stick it in the show notes properly, but the book is called Essentialism. And the guy that wrote it, I read it years ago. Funnily enough, Chris Evans starts going rabbiting on hugely on his breakfast show about this book about 3 or 4 months ago. So it's brand new and it's just been discovered, but no, it's been around a while. He makes the phrase that I've quoted quite often, is that you can go an inch in 100 directions, or you can go 100 miles in one direction. You know? Less is more. You know? Yeah. Cut it down to the one thing that you want to do. You're at work, you're involved in all sorts of initiatives, all sorts of meetings. Well, actually, do you really need to be involved in all of those? There's something about learning to say no an awful lot more. Oh, we'll drag the finance guy into that. Oh, we need the finance guy on that team. Well, actually, do they? Because it ends up with you attending 10, 15 meetings a week that only 2 of them are really adding value to what you actually want to achieve.
Yeah.
Um,
I think
yeah,
that,
get it down to that focus of what's the most important thing to make happen in the next month.
yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm such a big believer in that. I actually, going back to my corporate days, I got a reputation, deliberately so, for the guy who didn't do email. Now,
Mm,
really, I was playing out a strategy here where I was looking for a better way to look after my own time, my own
mm,
agenda. And when you get to that scenario where I was a product guy, so people would be inviting me to lots of different meetings. And so I just put some friction in front of that because I knew if I didn't respond immediately to emails and there was a lag time there, they had to either come and get me or find a different channel, which meant I was actually needed. And
mm,
by it's the same thing you can do if you want to break a habit. You create some friction to doing the bad behavior that you want to avoid.
mm.
And I always find that was quite a nice strategy to take more control of some of the time that I had and also be involved in meetings where I could actually add some value.
Mm. Yeah, I like that. I've heard a lot of people as well say that, well, okay, you can book me into meetings, but if you try booking me into a meeting before 12 o'clock, I won't
Mhm.
be there.
Yeah, that's a great strategy.
Or I'm not even going to look at email till 12 o'clock. So it's the same as
Mhm.
you're saying that if it's urgent, it really needs you, somebody will come and find you.
Yeah,
Because how often do you turn up in the office? The first thing you do is open email. And instead of going in and being proactive on your own agenda, you end up being reactive to 10 other people's agendas.
yeah,
And that's really what can start messing your day up.
yeah, absolutely. And then you end up with a week of meetings, which are with actually not having produced something at the end of the week.
Yeah.
That's what I've always been quite interested working with people during COVID. And now there's an opportunity almost working from home to take more control of your time and
Mm.
your output.
Yes.
And then it's almost easier to do calendar chunking and do
Mm.
what you said there of going, I won't respond to any emails before X time, which allows me 2 hours in the morning to really be as productive as possible and do maybe that project work that is going to move things forward.
Yeah. And get back to the Pomodoro technique and think about what is a working week. And certainly in my area of consulting, you're always talking about charging a day to a client,
Mm-hmm.
day being 8 hours, and a week being 40 hours. But what actually is a charge? There are some hours are worth more than others, without a doubt.
Yeah.
And I've come to the conclusion over a while that says, well, hang on, let's think about deep work. How many Pomodoros have I done this week?
Yeah.
And I tend to think in my own mind that if I can do 40 Pomodoros, that's a week.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you can actually, if you try to do that and make time for those 40, 25-minute sessions, you'll probably find your productivity, you work less and your productivity goes up.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I use something, you could probably see it behind me there. I call this a focus board. And
Yeah.
it's basically just a big old chalkboard. But
Mm.
I will essentially use post-its and track everything I do. It's not a to-do list.
Mm.
It's the things that are moving, let's say my business, or I'll use it for my own personal development or even my health, moving those areas forward.
Yeah.
And the great thing is at the end of the week, you've got a stack of post-its which you can run a small retrospective on to go, okay, what were the wins this week? What were the challenges? What was the output? And what was the impact of that output? So it's much easier to measure as well. So it becomes very tangible rather than going try to think over 40 hours, what have I actually accomplished this week? It's all there.
I
So
do something very similar. It's not, it's electronic post-its effectively. I use a little app called Trello.
yes,
Uh,
big fan of Trello.
lists and cards. I mean, my Trello cards are your post-its.
Yeah,
Yeah. I think that's a fantastic way. And I've got a kind of to do today and done.
exactly. Nice
Three
and
boards, three lists, and you just move the cards between the lists.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I find this is one of the reasons I like a physical. I use Trello as one of the things that I'll use as well when especially when I'm working in teams. I'll use like Miro is one of the tools that I use in Trello. I like the physical board because I get up in the morning and I go over and I prime myself. So
Yes.
when I talk about that 331, it's 3 years, 3 months, 1 week, but I also do ask that every morning I'll do primer questions.
Yes.
What's today about? What will I achieve today? Or what am I committed to achieving no matter what?
Mm.
And then you might do other kind of primer questions like gratefulness or excitement or why what will happen today that I'll feel lucky about. You'll
Yeah.
throw some curveballs in
And
there.
there's another little tool that I used to do just that sort of thing. It's a little phone app called 5 Minute Journal, which I
Oh,
think is
nice.
brilliant. Yeah, it just says, what are the three things I'm grateful for? What are the three things that will make today great? And then, what are my affirmations?
Yeah,
The affirmations bit I always find hard, but the first two I think are really good. And then it kind of asks you again, 5 minutes at the end of the day, what three things actually did make today great? What could have been better?
hmm
It's a super little app. It's free. Get it on your iPhone. I'll put
that's
a link
great.
in the notes.
And do you find that that helps create some consistency with it as well?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, yeah. And we touched on meditation briefly. It kind of puts you into that more mindful state first thing in the day.
yeah,
Um, you're kind of thinking about the bigger picture a little bit,
mm,
and there's a danger that what three things are going to make today great becomes a to-do list, but it's not supposed to be that.
yeah.
Um, it's not write your three biggest tasks down. It's okay. What really is going to make a difference? What makes it being a boring day where I'm just slugging through these tasks to what makes it an interesting day where I feel as though I've achieved something and enjoyed it?
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
I always consider the priming questions is literally priming your brain to put you into a great state
Mm.
so that you're unconsciously paying attention to those things which are important. Because
Yeah.
essentially that's what priming does. You prime yourself. It's the example of whenever I do the memory stuff, we do priming all the time. So I tell the story about when I bought a Citroen, the red Citroen car, and I brought it back home, and then suddenly I noticed my neighbor had a Citroen, red, exactly the same. I'd never seen it before. It wasn't important. As soon as I bought one, my brain went, "This is important," and then you start to spot it everywhere. Now you
Yeah.
see all the Citroens.
That's the typical thing when I find that when buying a new car.
Yeah,
Oh, I found a couple of years ago bought an Audi Q2, and it was exactly the same thing. I suddenly, as I was thinking about buying one, I suddenly noticed how many of them were on the road. And oh yeah, I like that color, and yeah, that's another one there, and yeah, you suddenly do. You definitely prime your brain.
yeah, and it's the hippocampus which is basically going, okay, is it important? Isn't important? Isn't important? And then you're filing things away. So
Yeah,
that act of asking those questions in the morning, if you go, what am I excited about today? It's not necessarily the thing that you pick. It's the fact that by thinking about it, you're priming your brain to look for exciting experiences, and that happens without you having to consciously direct your attention to it.
yeah.
But that only happens if you build up that habit, if it
Mm,
becomes something consistent.
mm, mm. Mark, we have covered an amazing amount of ground there. This was going to be a 20-minute chat that is now 40 minutes old.
I just realized the time. I know. It felt like 20. Felt like it went quite fast. There you go.
Yeah. I think before we digress any further, we ought to close this particular episode down. So, Mark, you've got some stuff inside GrowCFO, haven't you? If people want to follow this up further.
Yeah, so I believe we still got the Tiny Habits course inside there. Yeah,
Yeah.
uh-huh.
Tiny Habits course is free to
It's
everybody
free. Yeah, it's
joining the free
always where I
community.
suggest people start, basically.
Yeah. And
Start with the tiny
then
habits and learn how to create those behaviors. And then if you want to go further, then you can go further.
yeah, and we've got a number of your further courses bundled in the GrowCFO premium bundle, haven't we?
Yeah, actually, on that, and I know we're recording right now, but I don't know if you chat to that. So my stuff has actually isn't in there right now.
Right.
Yeah, so it's not in the premium because I know Dan was moving everything across. So probably not something you want to put in the podcast. But yeah, I believe Tiny Habits is still in there. I need to check on that.
I think it's all still there.
Is it still there? That's good.
At the
That's good.
moment,
But
yes.
I don't think the other stuff is.
Right.
I need to double check on that, but yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Tell you what, we'll loop back. So Mark, this your Tiny Habits course is within GrowCFO, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And it's a free course, so you can go in there, and it was actually um, tiny habits for working from home. It was a session that I put together, and so the good thing about it is it doesn't just show you how tiny habits work. It also looks at things like procrastination, tiny habits for focus, etc. So, and it's a great way to kind of learn the strategy, and then start to put it into practice, and then ultimately the goal is go create your own tiny habits, learn the process, look at your own life, think about the behaviors you want to create, and then create some tiny habits to get started with it.
Brilliant, Mark. Brilliant. Thank you very much for joining me on the GrowCFO show today.
Thanks, Kevin. Been a pleasure. Really enjoyed it.
Okay, that's brilliant. Yeah, we'll sort the last bit out in the edit.
Yeah, sorry, I just realised because I had a conversation with Dan quite a while ago.
Yeah.
And
No, it's all still there at the moment. What we're doing is we're moving away from that mighty network, and putting it all in growcfo.net on the website.
yeah, that's what he told me. I'm not convinced my stuff is there. If it is there, I don't know if the videos are accessible. So
Yeah, I haven't looked in there for a while. I'm sure. Normally, I go into the welcome session on Friday and I take people around the mighty network. And
Yeah.
certainly the last time I did it, your stuff was all still there in the courses section.
I wonder if the videos are accessible though, because I'm not too sure they were.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I had a chat with Dan. The reason why is that um, we weren't seeing the pickup, or we weren't seeing the impact of that. So it might be that when everything moves across, I can have another chat with Dan and see if there's kind of value in that. But we weren't seeing the pickup on the courses initially.
Yeah, and it's very difficult to see who's going into what within the mighty network anyway. And
Yeah, it's a little bit of a black hole, isn't it?
yeah, we found when we introduced premium that to get the right level of learning platform we needed for CPD accreditation, we couldn't do it in Mighty Network. There just wasn't the right functionality there. It's too big. So we ended up putting the premium first time CFO course is actually sitting on the website.
Yeah.
That then meant that everybody's got two logins. There's a login for the network. There's a login for the learning center. People decide they want to cancel a subscription. They cancel their free memberships to the community instead of their paid membership to the website. And it's too difficult to administer. So we're just saying, no, Mighty Network doesn't give us in other areas quite the experience we want to create.
Yeah.
Let's move everything now across the website. At first, we were just going to make sure all the premium content was on the website. But now we've decided we'd move everything and close the Mighty Network down.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
makes a lot of sense. I'm just thinking I double check as well my tiny habit stuff is still there, because I'm playing it through in my head now and I'm not sure it is.
Yeah,
I'm not sure it is. So actually, I don't know if that last bit of the podcast will work there either. Partly, that's a conversation
I'll check before we do that. But you know, I can easily. We'd sort of gone to a natural conclusion before I started mentioning that anyway. So I can edit around that last bit, so it'll work.
Sounds good.
Yeah, brilliant. But I'd love to have you on the next 100 days, because another concept of the next 100 days is, you're talking 3 years, 3 months. Well, it's down to that 3 months. It's what's the one thing that you can do different in the next 100 days.
That's brilliant.
There's a lot of themes we can hook into. Tell you what, Mark, you got a diary in front of you.
I do. I've always got my calendar here, just in case.
What about 3 p.m. on the 21st of January?
Perfect. Yes. Looks good.
That is a Thursday, isn't it?
Yeah, Thursday.
Okay, that's pending Graham's availability. I'll have to check with Graham.
Yeah. Perfect. got it. That's in.
Brilliant, brilliant.
We'll
And
block out some time before there as well.
yeah,
There we go. All done.
that is
Excellent, Kevin. Great.
brilliant, brilliant. So I don't know. You drop me an email on what you think you'd be interested in talking about on there, and I'll tell you a bit about the audience. You know what sort of things you're promoting, and
Yeah, I mean, maybe getting a bit more into the audience would be useful, because next year my focus is essentially around two areas, and there's a connection between them. One is the startup work that I'm doing.
yeah,
Primarily, the clients from that are being driven by Ash Moria, who's one of the lean startup founders. And so I'm kind of partnering with him on that. And then the other area is I'm basically kicking off on the Guardian Masterclass in January. And it's all about really starting to re-pivot the business around focus,
yeah,
productivity, motivation, all really hooked into career transition or side hustle or your own business. So it's, you know, there's outcomes that you go for there. And it's, in order to do this well, you need to look after yourself, your brain, be able to get into those states of flow, but then be also clear about what's the impact of that in your life. So that's the areas that I'm really going to ramp up and give focus to next year.
brilliant, brilliant. Love to talk about any of that, and you decide what's of most benefit to you to talk about, because whatever it is, Mark, it's going to make an interesting podcast.
Excellent.
Anything to bear in mind, if we're recording on the 21st of January, it's unlikely to be published until the end of February.
Sounds good.
We're
Right.
recording at the moment. I think we've already got all of January recorded in the can.
Yeah.
And then Graham's given me 2 for next Tuesday as well. So so we're already into February before we
That's
start.
great. Lining them up.
Yeah. We found we've got to. GrowCFO Show being newer, and I was struggling. I was Monday afternoon, I was thinking, oh shit, I've got to put a podcast out on Thursday morning. I've got to find somebody to talk to this week, because originally I was going to do one with Catherine this week, and she ended up going to a funeral. But then I thought, no, I'll try you. I'll try Andrew Waters. Who else can I try? And out of this, one must come out. Yeah. But I think by sheer accident, Andrew, followed by Catherine, followed by you, will actually make a nice sequence of stories. Yeah.
That's great.
Brilliant. Thank you, Mark.
Kevin,
right.
Great to chat.
Great chat indeed.
The festive season, Christmas in the year, or
Indeed,
Hogmanay,
yourself.
as we say in Scotland.
Yes, yes. Oh, that's the thing. Last Hogmanay, I was in Scotland. Yeah, we had a fantastic time at Hogmanay, and we're in a hotel in Perthshire. It was super.
Oh, that's beautiful up there.
Yeah,
really nice.
But no, all locked down this year. Can't do anything exciting like that. Yeah. Right, you take care. Merry Christmas.
Kevin. Yeah, Merry Christmas to you too. Chat soon. Bye-bye.
Yes, bye.